at its neutral position, we can see the scales, what they give. Now we can also change it to be forward of the aircraft, and here we can see the scales, what they give. If we go too far forward or too far backwards, the aircraft will tip. So moving on, this is how to calculate the aircraft mass using the default scale numbers. So with weight and balance, in order to calculate the center of mass, theoretically, this is what we did. This is what I did, and this is how to calculate it. 0.15 versus 0.17 is similar, however, there's a bit of discrepancy. Again, with the forward, there's a bit of discrepancy, a lot more in fact. This may be due to some of the problems or with the simulation. Yeah. Now, this is the thrust test, and now, as you'll see, they have a linear relationship, not a linear relationship, but exponential relationship. This section is to check the flight control surfaces, starting off with the aileron. So to roll left, as you can see here, there is a negative on the left and positive on the right, which is what we want, and this will cause the aircraft to move in the left. With right, the same thing occurs. With the ailerons, there and there, which is to be expected, and with the flaps, there's increased lift, and finally with the elevators, which is to be expected. Okay, so beginning off, this is around 0%, although it's a bit negative, but yeah, it's around 0. And as seen here, it's fairly stable, it's not too bad. Yeah. Now if we make it so that it's almost, so it's in the middle, between 0 and 50, it's again not that bad. There is a bit of instability when you get to really high amounts of elevated deflection, and pitch you get really high or really low down. And then altering it so it's very much close to 50%. You know, it's quite unstable, and small changes do a lot. Small inputs do a lot of output. Okay, so beginning off with the roll rate. So if we move it to the left, we can see how it seems to drop, go negative, move it to the right, and it goes positive. So moving on, if we then alter our free stream speed here, so currently it's at 20, so if we increase that to around 25, and we begin to alter our ailerons, there's larger peaks. Moving on to our rudder deflection, if we see here, there's large peaks, and if we move it to the opposite direction, it's negative, and it eventually oscillates back to its original trim position. When creating a large maneuver, they're very similar. However, one is just smaller than, however, yours is much smaller than the pitch. Okay, so thrust and pitch and vertical CG. So it's at negative 0.03. This is also the default. So increasing the thrust ever so slightly, and it seems to be tilting, but the pitch seems to be at 0, so it's fairly steady. Now if we go back to making the thrust 0, and alter it back to a normal default position, and we increase it to say 0.08, so it's pretty high, 0.05, increase the thrust, it's no longer at 0 and it's tilting, and negative 0.05, go here, back to 0, thrust 0, increase the thrust again, pitch is no longer 0. Okay, so this is the lift curve, drag polar, pitch stability and pitching moment, and as you can see here, with greater flap deflection there's more lift but there's also more drag. With the pitching moment, they seem to be very equal on either side, and as we increase the elevator deflection we get less, a lower amount of CL versus CM, and vice versa. With pitch stability, it's a much wider range of CL, with the change in the center of mass position. And now again, with the lift to drag ratio, as we increase our flaps, it seems that there's a much larger range of lift to drag ratio in the positive CL in comparison to the negative CL, whereas with the 0 it's very balanced, and they seem to and the maximum seems to increase further from around 0.4 to about like 0.7 to about to a much higher amount. And now this is just checking the rudders, and checking the ground the ground steering. Ground out flaps. The speed here seems to be just above, seems to be between 25 and 50, so around about 40, maybe about 30, 40. Okay, between with flaps. And here it's much smaller, to about almost 25. A throttle of about 54% keeps it fairly trim. So this is the course run. I'm not a pilot, so it hopefully be better with a real pilot. As you can see here, the throttle is kept at 54, which was what we said was previously at around its best. Although there are definitely some changes in the pitch, with more optimum settings and a better pilot, this would hopefully be better off. Elevators all the way down seems to definitely trim down, definitely helped there. And flying at a higher speed also helps. Whilst not at the altitude targeted, definitely it seems flying at a higher speed is helping. So the pilot would hopefully be better and would take these into consideration. And by not being too much or too little, the Albatross will be at its most optimal.